spanning academic, in- intellectual property, and regulatory framework, along with recognition as an award-winning teacher and environmentalist. So, in this session, we will be addressing the compliance challenges facing digital food businesses, fragmented supply chain, diverse vendors, and demand for real-time monitoring. We will also highlight how evolving FSSAI regulations are not merely enforcement tools, but a vital mechanism for building trust, ensuring transparency, and shaping future of online food commerce. I now hand it over to Dr. Venkatesh sir so that he can start with the webinar. Thank you. Hello, Venkatesh sir.
Thank you, Shreya. Can I start? I think there was some issue with the net, so I just had to go and come back.
Okay. I have just introduced you, sir. So you can start with your session now.
Okay, thank you, Shreya, for the introduction, and thank you all, and welcome to this webinar. Let me share my presentation. I hope all of you can see my presentation. Maybe one of you can respond. Shreya?
It's not yet visible, sir.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, now it's visible, sir.
Now it's visible. Okay. Thank you, Shreya. Again, welcome you all for this episode of webinar series on environmental health safety laws. And this is going to focus on FSSA, Food Safety and Security Act. And as you know, this particular act has touch points with all the three domains, environment, health, and safety. It has one of the closest connects. So this is a very important enactment as far as EHS laws are concerned. So we are going to discuss this act, FSSA Act. Okay. So with that, I will just start with setting the stage of sharing some news, related to food safety compliance. These are pretty recent, few months back. And this is a warning given by FDA from Maharashtra, warning given to the businesses that they are intended to take some tough actions over food safety violation. And similarly, FSSAI, the authority, which is the statutory authority, the nodal agency, they are planning to have revamped the regulation with respect to the organic food. You guys are all familiar that the organic food is getting a lot of traction in the market, and a lot of people are aware about the organic food. Similarly, from the authority, they have introduced a new concept, KOB, the kind of business, that's what it's called, for Ayurveda Ahara. It's going to come under the regulation. Then another news, pretty recent, from August, that they have revamped the testing, the testing of food samples, almost 90,000 samples they have tested. And and finally, we have heard that, especially for e-commerce, the enforcement is going to get stricter. So with that, I'll just jump and give a outline of this presentation. So we'll start with the enforcement reckoning and legal ripples. What are the consequence of contravention of the act, violation of the rules? What are the actions the enforcement authority are taking, and what are the developments? It's a very macro level presentation just to set the context and what we are looking forward and what is happening on the ground. Then we will see, this is the one slide, I would say. The take home message is pretty much is in this slide. We'll talk about what is the coverage of this act and what is the object of that, followed by a glance of the regulatory web. I call it a web because there's quite a bit of regulations around this act. Okay. Followed by, for completeness, a brief history of this legislative history of this enactment and some few tidbits trivia about that. Then we'll jump into the second part, which talks about the principles exclusion which is available in the Act and what are the principal fundamentals based on which the statutory provisions and the regulations are to be made by the authority. Followed by a pretty dense slide on the statutory definitions. A lot of commonly used words are defined in the statute. And as you all know, whatever definition a statute gives for a given statute, we have to follow that definition, not the textbook or dictionary or any other definition. And then we will move on to the obligations imposed by the Act and the compliance requirement. This will be like an eye-level snapshot. And the last section will be on the penal consequences. The Act provides for almost 18 different sections for different violations. Express penal provisions are provided. So with this, we'll go to the presentation. Oh yeah, I think I changed the order. Sorry, first we will start with the coverage. As you know, the name of the act is Food Safety and Standards Act 2006. What is the coverage? The words manufacture, storage, distribution, sale, and import are expressly mentioned in the act. In other words, pretty much anything to do with the food, either handling or distribution or producing, processing, everything comes under the ambit of this act. As you see, all the words are used. So it is safe to assume, rather, I would say presume, that if any person is dealing with food or handling food, they would come under the purview of this. So this is the big takeaway. See, I may belong to a software industry, I may belong to a print media industry. It has nothing to do with food as an industry, but in my premise, let's say I have a cafeteria, or if I'm even distributing food, then I come under the ambit of this. In fact, the Act specifically defines what food business is and what food business operator is. We will see in the definition. So again, to reiterate, if you deal or handle food, you come under the ambit of this Act. The Act comes under the coverage. Then what is the object of the Act? There are basically high-level twofold object. One is very directly connected to all of us, which is to ensure availability of safe and wholesome food for human consumption. So this is the major object of that. In fact, the Act name title itself contains safety, and this wholesome word, interestingly, we will see from another touch point with environmental laws is the 1974 Water Act that contains this word wholesome in its preamble. Wholesomeness of water, preservation of wholesomeness of water, it talks about. Similarly, the same word wholesome is used in this act itself. So it's not just about the safety, it is about the wholesomeness. When by wholesomeness, what we mean, the energy requirement, the nutrition requirement, and things like that. Then another practical object is to establish an authority, Food Safety Standards Authority of India, which is a statutory authority who have the central nodal agency for laying down science-based standards. So these are the twofold object of this. Okay. So with this, we'll go and get the overall what is the context of this webinar and why we need to take this very seriously. First, this histogram, it's a real data taken from FSSAI. It talks about the number of licenses in lakhs and number of registrations over a 3-year window. It's not the very latest figure. The key takeaway from this is that the trend you see that it's increasing. So that's the enforcement is kicking in and the trend is increasing. Probably most of us would have seen that even the roadside vendors are displaying these licenses and registration. Then what happens when you don't follow the provisions? Express fine and imprisonment are provided under the act, under the penal section. That's on direct impact on anybody violating. Not only that, the story doesn't stop here, the enforcement doesn't stop here. Even the Consumer Protection Act 2019 comes into picture, because this food delivery business, the food business is not only B2B, it is B2C as well. So whenever B2C comes into picture, Consumer Protection Act comes into the ambit. So this is a very, again, another significant issue when it comes to the violation of this act. The story doesn't stop here. Sorry. Another thing, it's a civil wrong. So the tort or the tortious liability comes into picture. The tort comes into picture when there is a duty to care is being violated. So the people who provide food, who manufacture food, who distribute food, they have a duty to care, to follow the law, adhere to the standards, the safety precautions. If there is a lacking or a failure or a violation or contravention, then this law, in Indian context, this is pretty nascent. Stage tort laws are not that famous or enforced, but that cannot be taken lightly, because the civil liability and the consequence and the financial implications could be quite high. The famous case law which changed the common law principles is, that's what is highlighted from 1930s, Donahue versus Stephenson. It's called a snail in the ginger bottle case, where the law which is common throughout the world now is, even if there is no express contract between the consumer and the manufacturer, there is a liability on the manufacturer when it comes to the safety and security, or the quality of the product being consumed. Okay. Even when the person who is consuming is not directly purchasing the product. That's what happened in this Donahue versus Stephenson case, where it is the friend of Donahue who bought a bottle of ginger beer, and she got sick, and rest is history. And it doesn't stop here. So far, whatever we have seen is the civil ramification, but there is a criminal component to it also. The erstwhile Criminal Procedure Code, CRPC, the section 133, which talks about public nuisance. And in the current criminal law, it is 152 section of BNSS. There is a express provision for the magistrate, the executive magistrate, to take action when it comes to public nuisance. And the classic landmark case is the 1980 Ratnam case, they call it, where there is a duty imposed on the, it is a statutory body in this case, but it need not be a public authority, even private enterprise. When there is a nuisance, the executive magistrate, like the collector, district collector, even DRO, and even to a certain extent, Tasandar, they are empowered by this criminal law to take action. They can even offer, they can even direct the closure of this. And above all, it is not just the financial and the imprisonment, the goodwill of the business will go. The business will take a hit, that means. Okay. And on the other side of the things, when you look at the regulatory body, the authorities, they are also not keeping quiet. They are also keeping pace with the developments, and the e-commerce is blooming and exploding. And way back in 2020 itself, there are directions or orders made to mandate licensing and registration of e-commerce food business, because there was a lacking on the understanding. They said, no, we are just offering a platform for buyers and sellers to exchange items, but that's not the case. As we see in the definition, it will be clear. And recently, again, they reiterated last December that they will come under the purview and they have to align and comply with the laws. Not only that, this year, few months back, they have again given an order. These are all the compliances the act and the regulation specify. Like, for example, when there is a closure, you have to submit a closure report. It's a compliance requirement. And very recently, like we said at the start, this month, September, they have introduced a new concept, kind of business concept. Okay. So we see that in all round there is an development and changes are happening. And when it comes to enforcement practical aspects and what we can see, if you look at the FSSAI website, this is one of the banner you see it right away. So this is the direction. This gives an idea of where we are going into. One nation, one food law, and it's tied up with the globally benchmark standards and practices. And this is not just guideline or advisory in nature. The statute talks about these things. We will see. Not only that, as far as the violation and getting the proceeding starting is concerned, like we discussed earlier, the consumer comes into picture. It's not like other regulatory authority where there is a set inspection procedure, the authority comes to the place and things like that. Here the grievances can be launched, initiated by individuals, and they have gone tech. They have an app for this, and the real data comes here. We see that they have received more than 20 grand number of consumer grievances in past 5 years. So, and again, they are taking steps, more steps. I'd like to point the last line. The FSSA deploys 305 mobile food testing labs nationwide to boost safety and awareness. This testing, these procedures are part of the act. And once when things don't meet the standard, then it's a violation and the proceedings kick in. And again, this is also recent from last month, I believe. It directs all e-commerce platform to ensure stringent food safety and hygiene protocols or face action. And it gives importance to training because we have a lot of traditional notion, there are a lot of customary notion about what is a violation. These are normal things, but status quo is no more valid with this new act, which has a coverage. We saw that it covers everybody. So with this context, I would like to show you pictorially the complex web of amendments and the regulatory framework. If you look at this is actually a pictorial representation of the actual the rules and regulations. There is one rule under the act, but that rule has been amended 5 times. And there are 21 regulations, and the names you can see that, laboratory sampling analysis, food recall procedure, packing, organic food. These are all regulations, actual regulations, and there have been multiple iterations
Sir,
of these regulations. Yeah,
sorry to interrupt, but can you just put it full screen
full
so it will
screen.
be visible everyone? Yeah.
Screen, 1 second. 1 second. Display setting. This one now. Is it full screen now?
Yes, sir. Perfect. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, this helps. And I think it will help in the next few slides with a lot of text. Okay. So what I was saying is this is a pictorial representation of actual regulatory rules and regulations which are framed under this IFSSA Act. Okay. So this is the complex web of regulations we have to navigate. So that's where the complexity comes. There is, you can think of any activity, there would be a regulation for that, starting from advertisement to packaging to labeling and everything. There is one. Okay. Okay. So comes to the next part of the presentation. So we'll start with brief history. Uh, so the story goes back to the 1950s, where the primary governing legislation was the Prevention of Food Adulteration Act 1950. At those times, that was the main and only governing act. And subsequently, there were a lot of orders framed under Essential Commodities Act, like the Fruit Products Act, order meat and meat products order, like so on and so forth. That was happening till the late 90s. But later we see that the technology increased, lifestyle changed, the kind of businesses which were blooming, it all changed, the entire landscape changed, and now we have Swiggy and what all the Zomato and all, everything has changed. So it necessitated change in regulatory frame. So if you look at the bottom, just to give, these were the other acts and regulations which were in place. All these were subsumed and revamped and repealed. And in 2006, this Food Safety and Standard Act was enacted. And it took a couple of years for the authority to be established under the act. Then it took further 3 more years for the actual enforcement. It started pretty much in 2011, but we are 14 years down the line, and now, as we have seen, the enforcement has been picking up, and the pace will increase in the days to come. Okay, and as far as the act is concerned, it's a fairly decent size legislature. It's about 12 chapters and 100 plus sections, two schedules, and as we discussed earlier, there is an exclusive chapter, express penalties. 20 different sections are there. It was like discussed earlier, assented in 23rd August 2006. The nodal authority was established in 2008. Effective enforcement started in 2012, sorry, 11. And 2012, another interesting, very important thing happened. They have a formed a system for food safety compliance system, and the data which you saw earlier, they were taken from that. Even the app was developed by them. So this is a very focused and well developed uh, net based application system, which is part of the FSSA Act. And the act gives power to the authority to establish such procedures and such protocols and such systems in place. That's why we have. So with this, next, yeah, I'm sorry, this is a very dense slide with a lot of text, but the main point is highlighted, and that is, there is an exclusive chapter titled General Principles of Food Safety, and it contains one single section, but 15 provisions. That gives the framework, fundamentals, principles for the authority and regulatory bodies to frame the provisions, the law based on these principles. So, what are these principles? Some of them I have highlighted here, like the protection of human life and health. That's a principle. Consumer interest. That's where you see that the applications development, the grievance through the portal, and all those things. Risk management. This, all of us in the corporate world, we know risk management is a common theme across corporate. And now the food business has become corporatized and monetized, and risk management principle is embedded in the statutory provisions. Another important thing, inform the general public of the nature of the risk. That's why we have an exclusive regulation which is called food recall procedure, which also comes from the statutory provision. Okay, and finally, prevention of fraudulent, deceptive, unfair trade practices. This is where it is asking, it complements and supplements our Consumer Protection Act, where these are the basic tenets of Consumer Protection Act. That's where it is. And finally, ensure unsafe and or contaminated or substandard food. And there is an exclusion provided. The exclusion is for the farmer, fishermen, and farming operations. Here, a key point to note is that the word agriculture is not used, but farming is used. Farming is more of local business, livelihood oriented word. Agriculture has a connotation related to corporations, industry. That's why this slight difference. So those things are excluded from the uh, provision of this act. Again, this is also a very dense word, and the section 3, which is the interpretation clause definition section of the act, it gives, the last I counted it at about 52 terms defined in it. And these are the why I have taken a small sample is a lot of words you see in this slide, we use it in our common day-to-day life, and it has a different meaning, and we take meanings. For example, adulterant, contaminant, food. What do you mean by food? Hazard, ingredient. All these are defined expressly in that. So we have to follow these definitions. In addition, there are certain words, like which I have highlighted. Misbranded, it is defined. I have not shown it here. Label, that is also defined. Uh, just in the interest of time, we will discuss a few of the things. First thing is food business, because this has very relevance to this audience and our discussion. Section 3(1)(n) defines food business. I have not given the exact copied the exact definition here. It runs into a few lines. The main crux I have copied: any undertaking, whether for profit or not, and whether public or private, carrying out, manufacturing, food services, packaging, distribution, transportation. So that's where even in temples, religious institution, food is offered. They come under the scope. But this is a very, very wide spectrum, and it brings in a lot of activities and everything under the scope of this. That's why at the start we say that if simple way to understand the scope is, if you're dealing with food, you can safely presume you will come under the act of this act. Food, it defines food. Any substance intended for human consumption. That's why even bottled water comes into the scope. There's a lot of news you would have heard about bottled water and FSSAI. Not only that, it gives power to the central government to notify any article as food. And I will take two more. One is advertisement. Traditionally, we have some notion of advertisement. It means, print media, television. Now we have social media, YouTube, banners, posters. But the advertisement defined in this act is very, very wide. It includes whatever we said, it includes those, and also includes label, wrapper, website, invoice. This is very, very interesting. Even invoice are considered. It makes sense in a logical way, because invoice carries information of your businesses, your name, your product, your pricing, everything. That's good. But so it's pretty wide definition. The word label I have underlined here. The reason is there is one definition of label in this section. What is called a label also it is defined. So you can safely assume that everything is advertisement. Again, a safe assumption, working assumption. So that's where this comes under contaminant. Any substance, whether or not added to the food, but which is present in such food as a result of, this is where it comes, interesting. Protection, packing, environmental factor. Only exception is insects, fragments, rodent ants, and other extraneous matter. This packing and environmental factor is enough to cover a lot of our activity. That's where even food delivery guys, they can say we are just delivering. But environmental fact comes into picture. Everything comes. With this, I just want to highlight the actual definition. Two items which is very, very important. Food business and food business offer. This is the actual definition I have copied and pasted from that. You see that means any undertaking, whether for profit or not, whether public or private, carrying out any of the activities related to any stage of manufacturing, processing, packaging, storage, transportation, distribution of food, import, and includes food services, catering services, sale of food or food ingredients. They covered pretty much everything. Similarly, food business operator, they define a term. In relation to food business means a person by whom the business is carried on or owned and is responsible for ensuring compliance of these rules. And so clearly it points to who is responsible for it. So in this, we'll go to some of the application. This is just to show you an idea of what the magnitude or quantum we are looking at. As I said, there are 21 regulations. I've selected few common regulation across different industry type agnostic. And the total number of compliances is 343 compliances are emanating from the Act, rule, and deselect. Just for sanity and understanding, I've split. This is an arbitrary classification. One time, on occurrence, recurring, continual. You see that most of us are very familiar with one time and on occurrence things like registration, licensing, information, notification. This forms a very small set, hardly 44. There's a big chunk of continual and recurring compliances like returns, displays, registers, specifications, standards. So that's where we come into picture, Aparajita. That's our interest in this whole game. That's where compliance services we come into picture. And obligation. This is like a one-word summary of the obligation. Basically, person dealing with food, handling with food should adhere to standards. Standards is the keyword, and specification, etc. And this is expressly specified in the from section 19 to 26. It talks about a whole lot of use cases, conditions where it talks you have to adhere to the standard. Of course, each conditions regulations are fair. And specifically, just to give a flavor, I've taken three things. Section 28 talks about food recall procedure. There are specific compliances with respect to food recall. One is to give if you are going to recall a food, then there is a presumption which comes that everything in that lot, that batch, is presumed to be not worth consuming. Then you have to give notice to everybody, all stakeholders, not just authority. This is where this act becomes more significant for us. Previously, or most of the acts, you see that you have to give notice to the authority, inform the authority, inform that. Here, expressly it says you have to inform the entire band of stakeholders, right from the raw material vendors to your end customers. Whether it is your customer or not doesn't matter. The person who is going to consume the food through how many number of supply chain, you have to inform in public. This is a serious thing because I wouldn't know which batch is contaminated or something. Okay. And another regulation which I talked about standard. It says the Indian standard IS, which is the standard as far as India is concerned, the Bureau of Indian Standard, they come up with all these standards for different processes, products, and items. If nothing is there for a particular given case, then you have to follow the international standard. Expressly, it says we can't escape. Like the food ecosystem is becoming multinational, international. There is a lot of transboundary migration of food. We are having food from all parts of the world. What happens? We have to follow those standards. Certificate of conformity. Specifically, it says this food, special ingredients, special items. You have to get certificate of conformity. Another example I have strike through because you might have seen. I think the most common is the dental paste. They say, oh, this paste is recommended by so and so professional, so and so medical body association. You can't do this anymore. Even if they have done given recommendation, you can't do this. That's what I have striked through. Expressly, the regulation says in your labeling, in your advertisement, you can't carry any of these messages, that it is recommended by the medical body association, nutrition professionals, blah blah. This is a very serious thing, and just to give a sample of the compliances. And the last bit uh, is on uh, penal consequences. This is again the actual data from the FSSAI, number of penalties and the penalty amount imposed. You see, again, there is a trend. The enforcement is on its wheels. They are taking things seriously. Of course, this data is from few years if earlier. Current data I couldn't compare. But the trend, that's what I want to show. The trend and the kind of figures we are looking at is yeah, correct. Yeah, look at the change. It's doubling. And next few slides, that's the last few slides in the presentation. I'm just run through the different statutorily act prescribed penalties for various contraventions. Left, you see the section. I mentioned that there are 20 sections. Each section specific express penalty, and they run into lakhs. Penalty for selling food not of the nature or substance or quality demanded. Directly it eats into the customer satisfaction. Consumer will come and look at the staggering amount. It's 5 lakhs. Section 53, I want to highlight this. This is a very common issue, is misleading advertisement. Already we have seen that advertisement is defined. Fines up to 10 lakhs. Misbranded food. We can't get away with a lot of things these days. This is another issue. And the actual definition of misbrand food in the interpretation clause of the Act, it runs into almost 1.5 pages. Lot of things are covered in that. It's so huge and very technical, and that's why I didn't cover it. But safe to say that they have covered a lot of ground in that. So the creative endeavor of playing with words and playing with things, it will be very much restricted. Again, 57, possessing adult. And here also they have been very ingenious, and they have classified into 2 categories: not injurious, injurious. And general penal class, section 58. Unsafe food. This comes into the safety aspect, and that's where the imprisonment will start kicking in. It's a very, very serious thing. Again, these are all I would call operational pitfalls or operational non-compliance, interfering with seized item, giving false punishment without license. Section 63, penalty up to 10 lakhs. So it's not it has quite a bit of financial implication, so how important the licensing is. That's where you see that even roadside vendors, street foods, they are carrying in FSSAI this registration. And of course, they are prescribed for continuing offenses as well. And finally, this is another aspect or unique feature of this act, because even though this act looks like a act which covers industry and environment and everything, this compensation class is very important, because we don't see this very often in statutes. Only specific statutes like labor laws or some new amendments in criminal laws, compensation is provided. This is where the tort comes into picture also. So you can see the relation with the tort, because in tort civil law, compensation is the main remedy, because what do I get, as a person aggrieved or impacted by some not doing? Punishing the offender is one, but what about the victim? Compensation is expressly provided in the act. Okay. So with this, I will thank you for your patience. We will, in the remainder of the webinar, we will take questions. So over to you. Uh, Thank you all. And over to you, Shreya. We can take questions now.
Yeah. Thank you, sir, for the session. We are now open for the questions. You can put the questions in the chat box, or you all can directly start with the questions.
Yes, 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 very much.
So we are having our first question over here in the chat box.
Okay,
What will be
there
the
is
penal
one.
consequences for posting misleading legal medical ad for toothpaste?
Yeah, I let me open the presentation. So I can give a generic answer only because the question is very generic, and a lot of details are missing. Uh, I would section 61 it talks about false information. It can be hit by this section. This is one I can think of. Another thing is there is one advertisement we saw, right? Yeah, misleading advertisement can up to 10 lakhs. Section 53. And I didn't touch upon the medical part of the act because it is a very small section only. There are some compliances related to medicines as well, because medicine is consumed. For example, if you take the tablets or if you take capsules, there are standards you have to follow for the capsules, because capsules by themselves are the tablets. There are component to it which are consumed but which doesn't have uh, medical efficacy for curing a particular illness. So that also comes into the ambit of this. Then the next question.
Okay. We have the second question. What is the count in the compliances and its obligation? And what is the ceiling limit to have FSSI license in terms of turnover?
The first question is, I think you are referring to the slide where I had put a table showing 343 count. That is the total number of compliances required which emanated from the act, from that rule, and select about 10 regulations. So if you look at an act or a law, it says you have to comply with these things. You have to get license. You have to get renew it. You have to nominate a person. You have to give returns. So these are all the compliances. If you compliance tasks, correct. So there are 343. That is the compliance task, which emanated from the act, the rules, and the select about 10 regulations. Okay, that's one. Second thing, on ceiling limit to have FSSA license in terms of turnover, I don't quite understand the question, because I think you're referring to the revenues thing, but the act does not have any such limits. That's where I was giving the example of. Is there any turnover limit prescribed under the act for getting the license under FSSAI? That is what the question is. Yeah, so it is not based on the revenue or the income, but rather based on the activity and the nature of substance. That's why I was trying to give analogy of streetwise street vendors. You know, what's it? Not linked to turnover. Yes, it's not linked to them. I think the turnover where it comes is when it comes to the implication, it will come, not for licenses or compliances. Then next is, can someone apply for
Next is, yeah, can someone apply for FSSI license for an FMCG business by themselves, or is an agent or consultant needed?
So this talks about the procedural part of obtaining a license. So it depends on, I don't know what kind of business and what kind of system you're talking about. Like any application procedure or interaction with the authority, you can do it yourself. And depending on your use case and complexity, if it takes more time and lot of nuances, then you take somebody's help to get it done. Okay, but it is your responsibility to get it done. For example, if you take Aparajita, we facilitate getting the license and doing the procedural compliance part. We do facilitate our clients. We have a business in that domain itself. Okay, so that is the thing. Because the licenses are manifold. I'll give you one example. Let's say you are using genetically modified food, or you are using radiation to process the food. Then you have to get a particular license from the Atomic Energy Authority. So such nuances are there. So if business operations is wide and it involves a lot of processes, technology, uh, then you may need a consultant's support and service. But if you are familiar with the law and the requirements, you can do it by yourself. Okay. Next question.
Okay, the next question again on the list of obligations and compliances. This was asked previously also.
Basically, on a lighter note, basically you're asking the USB of Parajita, So this is what we do day in and day out. We read the act, we read the regulations, and we come up with this list. Probably you can touch base with our marketing team and we can collaborate and we can do it. Okay.
Yeah. The next one is, the Gujarat government has recently shared a draft for penalty revision. So could you please provide information on it?
Yes, there is one more draft which came not recently, but little that Jan Viswas Act, Central Government Act. They also revised the thing. I'm sorry to repeat myself. I think the response is same as my response for the previous question. So whatever I have shown, these are all specific nuances and all. So that's our company's Aparajita's USP.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So, sir, there was a question earlier where a person had asked what is the limit of FSSI license in terms of turnover. So, for that, they have given that is there street vendor to have FSSI license. So it is additional to that point.
Yeah. See, there are two things. We are talking about license and registrations. These are two different things. So the question was pertaining to licenses, right? So there is a turnover implication for that, and I think the latest figure is up to 12 lakhs. You need to do registration, and for license, there are central and state licenses because. And I think there is a authority difference. About 20 crores, you have to go for the central license. So that's the figures in short.
Okay, sir. The next one was in Tamil, the tobacco products are banned in terms of unsafe food. how FSSI Act regulates or act.
So I'm not sure what exactly you mean by this question. If I understand, the way I understand is, so the banning of tobacco food, that is a different domain, because see, what is the purpose of this act is it talks about safety, food safety. That's number one. And the tobacco products which are not banned expressly in other acts by any other act, that will come into the purview of this act. I'll give a different example. Uh, alcoholic beverages. Alcoholic beverages are regulated under this. Okay. So this act you have to see in conjunction with other acts. If some other act bans a particular product, then you can't take recourse to this. Okay. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, sir.
I
Are
think
there
somebody
any
wants
more
to,
questions? Yeah.
I think one Mr. Balaji wants to have an open mic. Can we
Karthik,
can
is
we
it
open the
possible?
mic? The host
Yeah,
can, I
he can
think they
type
can.
type the question. Yeah, it's not possible for attendees to talk. He can type the question.
Okay. Mr. Balaji, sir, could you please type your complete question? Yeah. Meanwhile, we have one more question by Mr. Wasim. If someone is doing business in SR, having the food outlets more than 2 states, is central license mandatory for head office?
I think without knowing the exact details, it will be difficult to give a specific answer. But like any other, interstate businesses, central authority will come into picture when there are more than one states involved. So that's the general principle of governance, that more than one state, then the central authority comes into picture. So I would reckon the central license would be mandatory, because the jurisdiction and enforcement of state authority would be limited to the particular state. And if there are any transboundary violations, only central authority will come into picture. Here we have a question.
Okay. Yes. So, are there any more questions? In case there is anything, we would be even getting back to you over an email so that we can resolve your questions at a stretch.
So there is one more question I think Mr. Balaji had posted.
Uh, Packed food items need license, like loose rice, dal, etc. Momo vendors, chow mein vendors. I think he's asking about licenses, sir.
Yeah. So the answer is yes and no. Um, no, because as we saw in the exclusion, it depends on who is selling and how you are buying it or how you are procuring it. Then it won't come. But otherwise, it comes, because the act clearly says food for consumption, any substance which is consumed. The packaging, not packaging, and all, it's the part of the operational aspect. When you are packing it, then the laws pertaining to the packaging comes into picture. Okay, so it doesn't matter. And as far as chow mein, and these are all processed foods, right? So definitely it will come into the purview of the act. So we have few more minutes for a couple of questions. Yeah.
Yes.
So we have a question from our own audience here. So
when you say that any citizen can file a case, can prefer to apply through,
um,
and you have also quoted a figure 21,000 baht.
Yeah.
How many were saw? Do we have any statistics?
The question, I would give a different flavor of answer to this, okay, which is very unique for this act as I see it. Then come back and directly answer your question. The act gives the right to a purchaser, consumer, to do testing of the product he or she buys. You can do analysis of the product. It gives a right, statutory right. And it puts a burden also, compliance burden on the, I don't remember on top of my head what is the section number, okay. But it gives a burden, compliance burden for the individuals. Forget about persons, even individuals. I go to a shop, I pick up some product, I want to get it tested. I have the protection of law under this act, number one. If I am going to do that, so that there is no malafide, there is no corporate espionage, or corporate, controversy or corporate conspiracy, the act mandates the individual to comply with a particular provision which says that I have to inform the person and the authority that this is such and such product, I have got it, and I want to test it. And there are procedures, compliances mandated for testing. You have to send it to NABL accredited labs and things like that. So it's not just an individual, crying over a food. It's much more than that. That empowers. Okay. I may think the food I consumed is wrong, I may get affected. It gives much more than that. Having said that, coming back to your question, how much is resolved? I don't have the statistics. I did not analyze the statistics because the purpose of this seminar is thrust is little elsewhere. But if you go to that system, that compliance system, online portal, they have given very good numbers are there. I have just seen it. I don't remember, so I don't want to give you any.
It's great to understand how effectively it is being.
Yes. So I would say pretty effectively, given all things considered, that it's a pretty nascent stage and things are exploding and the awareness level is also at some stage. So I would say it is, for a greater part, I would say it is pretty effective because if you see the news, at least every day there will be one news related to FSSAI's action. But it may not be as effective as we would like to be as an individual consumer of food and seeing the issues. But from a system point of view, I feel at least that the effectiveness is increasing day by day. See a few more questions in the chat box, Shreya.
Yes, sir. So there is a comment also by Mr. Wasimji that nowadays food safety officer and all, there is a bit of corruption. So if FSSAI look into it, they are also openly asked for under table cost. So that was a statement, I
Unfortunately,
would say,
beyond
rather
the
than
scope of
question.
this is beyond the scope of this webinar. It won't be appropriate to comment on this question. You can go to the next question.
Yeah. Is there any compliances as to food reels or blogs posted in Instagram and YouTube?
I think this is a fantastic question. I like it. But if these reels and blogs are posted on behalf of the food handling person, then yes, it comes under the advertisement regime. Okay. If it is posted for monetary gain, like I'm commenting on a particular thing, somebody gives me money, then also it will come. If the third use case I can see is I just like some food and I'm commenting, that to be honest, I don't have an answer now. But the first two use cases, it will come. Squarely, it will come. Good, very good. I like this question.
Yeah.
One more.
And
I think we can take the last.
Yeah, last question from Wasim ji. So here he wants to know what are your words, how to manage the harass by FSO.
Yeah, again, I'm sorry, I'm repeating myself. This is beyond the scope of this presentation. I think you have to, if I want to give you an unsolicited advice, you have to talk to some advocate in private. Yeah, actually, the funny part is if you are compliant, you won't get harassed, as simple as that. For the most part, at least.
Okay, so now I think the questions are over, right? Yeah. So thank you, sir. Thank you for the webinar. And thank you, everyone, for patiently hearing to the webinar. Thanks, everyone. In case you all
Thank
have
you.
any
Thank you all.
questions, we will be reaching back to you on mails.
Yes, I think the answer is yes, Mr. Balaji. We can make complaint. I think that's the common thing they use. You can visit the portal and you can download the app and you can make a complaint if you wish. Okay. Thank you, Shreya. Thank you, everybody, for the nice question and participation. I hope it was useful. Thank you all. Have a good day. Bye.
Thank you.
Sir,